Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Kompasa. Today, we're going to talk about the Ukrainian purge of officials, government officials, and the United States pushing Central and South American countries to give Ukraine Russian weapons. And there are some dubious information about Morocco either denying or supplying Ukraine with 20 T-72 tanks, as well as some form of revelation that Poland considered partitioning Ukraine during the early stages of the Maidan coup or uprising, or depending on what political leaning you are in this question. So I'm going to start with the Ukraine purge, so we can start here. Ukraine dismissed the governors of 5 battlefield provinces and an array of other senior officials on Tuesday in the biggest shakeup of its wartime leadership since Russia's invasion last year. May I add, this is from France 24. Separately on Tuesday, a long-awaited decision on whether allies could send German-made heavy tanks to Ukraine finally reached Berlin after Poland said it had formally sent its request. Among more than a dozen senior Ukrainian officials who resigned or were dismissed on Tuesday were the governors of Kiev, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. All 5 regions have been major battlefields over the past year, giving their governors an unusually high national profile. A deputy defense minister, a deputy prosecutor, a deputy head of President Volodymyr Zelensky's office, and 2 deputy ministers responsible for regional development were among the others who left. Some, though not all, had been linked with corruption allegations. Ukraine has a history of graft and shaky governments and is under international pressure to show it can be a reliable steward of billions of dollars in Western aid. There are already personnel decisions, some today, some tomorrow, regarding officials at various levels in ministers and other central government structures, as well as in the regions and in law enforcement, President Volodymyr Zelensky said in an overnight video address. Zelensky aide Mikhailo Podolyak tweeted, "The president sees and hears society, and he directly responds to a key public demand, justice for all." So, why does this come now, though? I think, first of all, I think it's media optics. Ukraine is taking some heavy losses in Bakhmut. Russia is advancing rapidly in Zaporozhye. Many are speculating that at least those who were resigning freely, they did so because they know that this is a sinking ship, right? And you know, they want to get out of Ukraine. I think Arostovich actually came out and said some more crazy things about, you know, about the Ukrainian national anthem being a fake song or something. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but something along those lines. I don't know how this man is walking around in Kiev during this time and saying these things. Either he is protected by, you know, some 3-letter agency or some oligarch over there. But I don't think that this is a coincidence that we're seeing all of these resignations and purges and whatever. I think it has to do with the fact that that the West, first of all, is panicking. They need media optics. They need to show that when we are sending all this money and equipment to Ukraine, that, you know, it has to at least appear that the Zelensky regime is having some sort of oversight and control over the things that we send, right? Because a lot of the things that the West has sent, all the money packages, the weaponry, actually a lot of that doesn't make it to the front line. And there was even early news coverage about weapons that were sent to Ukraine actually being sold off on the black market. Not too long ago, I think it was 2-3 months ago, there was a situation in Finland where they had arrested gang members from, I think, various rival motorcycle gangs, and they were caught with Ukrainian weapons. So a lot of this stuff is siphoned off, and unfortunately some of these politicians have had also sold, I think, generators and stuff like that on the black market. So it's these things are unfortunately very common in Ukraine. But like I said, I think it comes now because they need the media optics to sort of somehow clean this image up. But yeah, it's a total disaster. But to be fair, Ukraine has always had nothing but media optics usually. They had some lucky moments there in the late summer and early autumn. That shit has run out by now. Okay, the purge came 2 days after a deputy infrastructure minister was arrested and accused of siphoning off $400,000 from contracts to buy generators. Yeah. And one of the first big corruption scandals to become public since the war began 11 months ago. The defense ministry said the deputy defense minister Vyacheslav Shapovalov, responsible for supplying troops, had resigned to retain trust after what it called untrue media accusations of corruption. It followed a newspaper report that the ministry overpaid for food for troops, which the ministry denied. The prosecutor's office gave no reason for the sacking of Deputy Prosecutor General Oleksiy Simonenko, who had been under fire in Ukrainian media for taking a holiday in Spain. Though Zelensky did not name any officials in his address, he announced a new ban on officials taking holidays abroad. Well, the optics of going to Spain under a wartime period is horrendously bad. Kirilo Tymoshenko, deputy chief of staff in Zelensky's office, announced his own resignation, also citing no reason. He had helped run the president's 2019 election campaign and more recently had a role in overseeing regional policy. The changes are a rare shakeup of an otherwise notably stable wartime leadership in Kiev. Apart from purging spy agency in July, Zelensky has mostly stuck with his team built around fellow political novices the former television actor brought into power when he was elected in a landslide in 2019. Well, stable can be debated. I mean, I remember when the Ukrainians and the Russians were negotiating in April, and the Ukrainians actually, one of their negotiators was later killed by the SBU because they thought that he was a little bit too friendly to Russia, right? And on their terms or whatever. So they never really gave a clear reason, right? This sort of gangsterism is quite common actually in the Ukrainian government security forces, so to speak. All right. Decision time on tanks. Now we're going to the tanks, and we're actually going to continue a little bit on the tank issue as I've said before. So Poland's announcement that it had officially asked for Berlin's permission to export German-made tanks to Ukraine appears to leave German Chancellor Olaf Scholz little room to continue putting off a decision in what has become the main debate among allies over how best to support Ukraine. I hope that this answer from Germany will come quickly, because the Germans are delaying, dodging, acting in a way that is difficult to understand. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki told a news conference. I am so sorry if I butcher these names. We can see that they do not want to help Ukraine defend itself in a wider way. I mean, Jesus, the Polish government is absolutely crazy. The Germans have already depleted a large part of their military stockpile. I mean, their artillery, ammunition, and so forth. So, as well as their tanks, right? They don't have actually that many tanks. A German government spokesman said, "We will treat the proceedings with the urgency they deserve." Kiev pleaded for months for Western tanks, which it says it desperately needs to give its forces the firepower and mobility to break through Russian defense lines and recapture occupied territory. Germany's Leopards, fielded by armies across Europe, are widely seen as the best option, available in large numbers and easy to deploy and maintain. But Germany has had so far resisted pressure to pledge any of its own Leopards until now, and had said its allies had yet formally request permission to send theirs. The Germans have already received our request for permission to transfer Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Blaszczak wrote on Twitter. I also appeal to the German side to join the coalition of countries supporting Ukraine with Leopard 2 tanks, he added. This is our common cause, because the security of the whole of Europe is at stake. The chief of staff of Germany's military said whether to send tanks was a political decision. A senior official said that the choice lay ultimately with Scholz and his cabinet. At the end of the day, the decision will obviously be taken by the Chancellery in consensus by the government. Tobias Lindner, State Secretary at the Foreign Ministry, said at a defense conference in Berlin organized by Handelsblatt. Spring will be decisive. Front lines in the war have been largely frozen in place for 2 months despite heavy losses on both sides. Yeah, now they're saying it's on both sides to cope with the fact, and I've said this before, and I get this information from people like Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor and Brian Berveletich, because these people have military background, right? They're very knowledgeable about these things. So, for every one Russian soldier, 8 Ukrainians die. So 100,000+, over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. Russian side, it's far less. It's estimated between 15 to 20,000. But Russia and Ukraine are widely believed to be planning offensives in the coming months. Yes, I would say that the freezing weather is more on the Russian side, the benefit, so to speak, because, they have the winter gear and all that stuff. Western countries pledged billions of dollars in military aid last week, but have yet to respond to Kiev's request for hundreds of heavy battle tanks, pending on a decision from Germany over the fate of its Leopards. A Ukrainian official said the upcoming spring and summer could be decisive. If the major Russian offensive planned for this time fails, it will be ruin of Russia and Putin, Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence, said in an interview with the news site Delphi. Okay. Well, I already gave my commentary on that. I don't think they will ruin the Russian army, or Putin's army, as they put it. It's the Ukrainians, unfortunately, that's going to be destroyed. And as I've said before, I don't think I've said it here, but the war in Ukraine will lead to the death of Ukraine as a nation state. The Ukraine that we see today is not going to be there. And that's one of the sad consequences of this. And you know what? That's the fault of the West. You know, because they used Ukraine as a de facto proxy against Russia. And Russia said, niet means niet. I mean, like, we've told you this is our red line. But Western countries don't believe Russia, or anybody else for that matter, have any security interests. Now we're going over to the, we're going to talk more about the, you know, tanks and the military stuff. So here's an article from Voice of America, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday. So the U.S. pushing Central and South American countries to give Ukraine quick military boost, and this shows how desperate the Westerners are, or the NATO camp is, the NATO stand is to provide you know, Ukraine with Russian weapons, because I told you they're used to Soviet weaponry or Russian weaponry, not to Western stuff. Washington, the latest round of military assistance packages for Ukraine, including billions of dollars worth of Western-made armored vehicles and air defense systems, is not stopping the United States from also trying to get the Ukrainian military Russian-made equipment. U.S. military officials overseeing operations and defense relations in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean see an opportunity to persuade some of those countries to give up their Russian-made weapons and systems and send them to Kiev. In return, they will get American weapons, allegedly, right? That's what they've been told. We're working with the countries that have the Russian equipment to either donate or switch it out for United States equipment. So, General Laura Richardson, the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, told a virtual audience Thursday during an appearance at the Atlantic Council in Washington. Richardson said discussions with 6 countries in particular are in the works, but did not elaborate. U.S. Southern Command also declined to provide additional details. As a matter of protocol, we're not going to discuss details about the defense resources of sovereign nations or speculate about any support to Ukraine they have not already announced, Southcom spokesman Jose Ruiz told Voice of America by email on Friday. Insofar as offering our defense partners opportunities to purchase or receive U.S. defense equipment, we offer what we consider to be a better alternative, he added. U.S. defense equipment is superior in both its proven reliability and the level of sustainment support it receives during its operational life. I disagree on that. In fact, Scott Ritter went through the Patriot system, for instance. It had a horrible track record in the Iraq War, in the first stages. In fact, it shot down plenty of Allied airplanes. And it was also yesterday, I saw a video with what's his name? Not history buffs. Forgot his name. But there was a small clip of a Ukrainian soldier with a Belgian semi-automatic weapon, completely frozen. Right. The Kalashnikov is known for its, reliability in those areas. But I'm not going to go into detail with that. The Kalashnikov models have also evolved. There's new versions of it. So there's different types of the AKs, new types of AKs that are coming out right now. So, and the Russians are using new AKs, right? Their army at least. So they use AK-12 and AK-15. Russian weapons are good for those type of conditions. So. Familiar to Ukrainians. Other top U.S. officials have hinted at the importance of providing Russian-made equipment that is already familiar to Ukrainian troops. cautioning that it may not be possible to fully train Kiev's forces on the new Western systems in time to counter possible Russian offenses in the coming months. That will be a very heavy lift, General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, said Friday after a meeting of the Ukraine contract group at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. The Ukrainians have the personnel, but they have to be trained, obviously, he said. And if you look at the weather and terrain, etc., you can see that you have a relatively short window of time to accomplish both those key tasks. I think it can be done, but I think it will be a challenge. There's no question about it. Here we go. But this is all media optics, again, I believe. A lot of it. I apologize. They're seeing that this is crashing, right? This is a project like many other neocon projects that is just going to shit. Pardon my language. It's just going to hell. And these people, whether they be neoliberals or neocons, they just have no reverse gear, right? When they are doing some messed up stuff, whether it be Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Ukraine, whatever it may be, okay? They just keep going. They keep going and going and going, right? The problem here is that we're dealing with Russia, which has a strong army. It has nuclear weapons, above all. And this can lead to a World War III scenario. Perhaps, unfortunately, even to a nuclear war. I don't want to panic you people, but it's a real possibility, right? And even Lavrov said recently now in his visit to Africa, he said we're no longer fighting a hybrid war with the West. And we're coming closer and closer to I'm paraphrasing, but we're coming closer to a direct confrontation. So, in contrast, Russian-made weapon systems currently being used in Central and South America could be used by the Ukrainian military almost immediately, and some countries have significant stockpiles. So, the best examples of that are Peru, Mexico, Ecuador, Colombia, and Argentina, said Ryan Brobost, a research analyst at the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Another one of those three-letter or multi-letter agencies. But anyway, specifically, they have a lot of Russian or Soviet-made helicopters, he told Voice of America. According to data collected by the Swedish-based Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, at least 7 Central and South American countries have bought weapons from Russia since 2000, with Brazil and Peru taking delivery of Russian military equipment as recently as 2016. Additional data collected by the International Institute for Strategic Studies as of 2021 and analyzed by Brobst and his colleagues at FWD indicate 6 of those countries have systems identical or similar to those traditionally used by Ukraine's military. Let's see here. Helicopters, rocket systems. Okay, for example, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, and Peru all have variations of Russian Mi-17 transport helicopter requested by Ukraine shortly after Russia launched its invasion last February. Ecuador and Peru have a total of about 40 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, though some may not be serviceable. Peru and Uruguay have a variety of Russian-made armored vehicles, including BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles and MTLB amphibious armored vehicles. Just as important, Peru and Uruguay have other capabilities that could meet immediate Ukrainian needs, including the tanks, air defense systems, and even fighter jets. Uruguay has 15 Tiran 5 tanks and an Israeli modified version of the Russian T-75. Meanwhile, Peru has the Russian-made S-125 surface-to-air missile system, 35 self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, and 80 TOW anti-aircraft guns. Peru also reportedly has 9 serviceable MiG-29 fighter jets and another 4 Su-25 ground attack aircraft in storage, though some analysts estimate the number of serviceable attack aircraft is higher. Okay, there are also a large number of Russian-made man-portable air defense system manpads, okay, that could be available. Countries like Brazil and Ecuador operate hundreds of Russian Igla portable surface-to-air missiles, with Brazil in particular having received modern Igla-S systems since 2010. Henry Zeimers, a program coordinator and research assistant at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, told Voice of America by email. Manpads, especially older Igla-1 models, which, while less effective, are easier to part with and fairly plentiful within the hemisphere, he said. Ukrainian forces are well trained by now on both the Igla and the US Stinger systems, and their compactness and mobility makes these systems vital for sustaining combined arms offensives. Reluctance. Some of these countries, though have previously balked at sending weapons to Ukraine, notably Mexico, with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador last June calling the notion immoral. I'm not surprised at all. Other countries, though, could be persuaded. The United States would probably have to offer the correct incentives for these countries to transfer their weapons, be it cash, some sort of security arrangements, or promises to backfill with weapons. The FTD's Brobst told Voice of America. Yeah. That none of the countries has agreed so far to give up their Russian-made weapons and weapon systems illustrates the difficult task U.S. officials facing U.S. officials, and it may not get easier, given that U.S. defense companies are already under pressure to increase production to meet looming U.S. shortages. Exactly. I said this before, both the United States and Europe have shortages in their ammunition and weapons in general, because they don't have that same industry as Russia has. I mean, Russia produces, its state, first of all, their weapons industry is state-owned, right? So when it's state-owned, you produce weapons for a purpose and for a need, right? And American companies and many European countries, they produce weapons because of profit. So they don't have that mass production line. Plus, the Europeans and the Americans have been fighting mainly insurgency wars in the Middle East, perhaps in Latin America to a certain extent. They haven't really faced armies that, like conventional armies. They fought guerrilla armies such as the Taliban or ISIS or God knows how many of these groups. In Colombia, you have the FARC, you have different right-wing militias. So you don't need to necessarily produce as much weapons as maybe Russia is doing now when they're fighting. Well, they're basically fighting NATO. So not just Ukraine, they're fighting NATO. Still, Russia's hold on some of these Central and South American nations could be loosening. Typically, Russia's advantage in the arms export markets was that they are significantly cheaper, faster delivery times, and they don't care how countries use them, Probst said. However, given the fact that Russia has lost a huge amount of equipment in Ukraine, that is bullshit, but anyway, and needs to resupply their own forces, it's going to be very hard for them to offer arms exports. This is an opportunity for the United States to peel away these countries from the reliance on Russian weapons. This guy's laughable, really. No, Russia has not lost a ton of equipment or huge amounts of equipment in Ukraine. This is what they do. They always project their own nonsense on for instance, Russia, right? I apologize. I just gotta put my phone on silence in case anybody calls. But nonetheless, back again. There we go. And yeah, there was rumors that Morocco was sending T-72 tanks to Ukraine. Apparently, that deal is not going through. But I have two articles here. One saying that it denies sending T-72 tanks to Ukraine, and one that says that it did hand over these T-72 tanks, 20 of them, that is to say. I can start with the one that says it handed over them, and this is from Interfax Ukraine, a news agency. It says the Moroccan army has handed over to Ukraine about 20 T-72B tanks that have been upgraded in the Czech Republic at the repair line of the Excalibur workshops. MENA Defense, an information magazine on military issues of the Maghreb countries, reported on Sunday. About 20 units were sent to the battlefield a week ago, and they are visible during the visit of Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala on the workshops of the Excalibur Army Company in Sternberg, which had carried out their refurbishment, the publication reported. The exact number of units transferred equipment is unknown. According to the publication, the Moroccan army had 148 T-72s, 136 T-70Bs, and 12 T-72BKs, which the country purchased in two batches in 1999 and 2000. Morocco's decision to deliver arms to Ukraine was taken almost under duress during the Ramstein Summit for Ukraine, which took place on April 26, 2022, and which was hosted by the United States at this summit. Tunisia and Morocco were the only two countries to represent North Africa. Tunis had dispatched at the time 2 cargo planes to Rzeszów Airport in Poland, which centralizes logistical aid to Ukraine, and there Morocco seems to have followed suit by sending out humanitarian aid, but not sending humanitarian aid, but outright weapons, the publication said. So let's see what the other article says, so we can clear this confusion out. And this is the newsdept.com. So Rabat, January 23rd, the Algerian edition of MENA Defense reported that Morocco was the first African country to supply arms to Ukraine. We're talking about modified T-72 tanks. The author of the Arab Africa Telegram channel denied these rumors, citing the words of the kingdom officials. Representatives of Rabat said that they did not send military equipment to Kiev. T-72 tanks previously purchased from Belarus were being modernized in the Czech Republic, and it was the Czechs who delivered them to Ukraine in violation of contractual terms, the report says. It is worth noting that in 2021, Morocco signed an agreement with a Czech company on the purchase of the first batch of military equipment and the modernization of other copies previously received by the Royal Armed Forces from the Republic of Belarus. And the Czechs violated the contract in favor of Ukraine after the intervention of the United States and the Netherlands, Rabat said. So it was the Czechs who sent these tanks that were, if I understood it, meant for Morocco. So it wasn't Morocco itself that sent it. Okay. Recall that some European countries refused to transfer the Leopard 2 tanks in Kiev in particular. Germany announced its reluctance to supply the Ukrainian armed forces with military equipment. Okay, so Morocco didn't actually send the tanks. because they knew it would violate their contract with the Russians, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And to our final article, and this one is from Russia Today. This is something that many people have been talking about before. You know, the Poland's the elite, the wishes of the Polish elite to annex Western Ukraine. Like, this is historically have been part of Poland, and they are hungry for this part. So, but let's read what the article says. It says Poland considered partitioning Ukraine. Former FM. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has denied the claim, urging Radoslaw Sikorski to retract and weigh his words. Former Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski has suggested that the government in Warsaw considered partitioning Ukraine in the first weeks of the military conflict between Kiev and Moscow. Sorry, I said Maidan. It's the first days of Kiev and Moscow. Anyway, his comments came in an interview with Radio ZET on Monday, prompting a strong retort from the country's Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki. Sikorski was asked if the ruling Law and Justice PIS government had ever entertained the idea of dividing up Ukraine. He replied by stating that there was a moment of hesitation in the first 10 days of the war, when we all didn't know how it would go, and that maybe Ukraine could or would fall. Had it not been for the heroism of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and the help of the West, things could have been different, Sikorski said. His remarks soon drew a reaction from Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, who accused Sikorski of behaving like a Russian propagandist. The former foreign minister must weigh his words. I expect these disgraceful statements to be withdrawn. I call on the opposition to dissociate themselves with Radoslaw Sikorski's declaration, Morawiecki tweeted. It is not the first time Sikorski has been at odds with the government in Warsaw. In September, the ex-minister tweeted, "Thank you, USA," alongside a photo of a massive gas leak caused by the sabotage of Russia's Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea. Wow, this guy is, he's wild, man. He's Anyway, Sikorski further congratulated those responsible for the act, saying the severe damage caused by the natural gas pipelines would force Russia to talk to Poland and Ukraine if it wanted to continue delivering gas to Europe. Good work, he concluded in a second tweet. He later deleted both tweets. Russia responded to the former FM's post by calling it an official statement, confirming the Nord Stream incident was a terrorist attack. It still remains unclear who exactly was behind the sabotage, as both Ukraine and Washington and its allies have denied responsibility. Well, they had the motive, so it was probably them. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Like, share, and subscribe to the Kompasa. I have an Odyssey channel as well, so check that out. But yeah, we are living in dangerous times. Take care for now.